Alright, today I'll be cleaning a carburetor on a 1975 KE100. And this carburetor is actually in the crankcase underneath one of the covers there, so it's a little bit unusual style, but I'm going to show you how to remove it from the crankcase and then pull it apart and clean the bottom of it, pull the cap, pull the choke, idle, screw. So we've got, you don't obviously have to pull your motor to do this, but we're pulling that motor anyways for other reasons. But if we have your carburetor here sitting alongside your motor, we've got a rubber cap on the side of your motor there. You're going to remove that rubber cap. A lot of times you can just grab it with your finger. And underneath that rubber cap is a flat screw, and you're able just to screw that carburetor, or that screw out, loosen it up, and that's going to allow that clamp that's tightening onto that back piece to be removed off of there. And then also this rubber boot. Obviously we had another cover over top here. That rubber boot's going to have to be pushed up. It's just held on by a spring here. So pop that spring out from this groove, push that boot up just a hair, and we're able to just walk that carburetor out. Before we do that, we're gonna look at our drain system here. When your cover's sitting up like this, if your carburetor is bouncing around, your motorcycle's bouncing around, it's going to drain fuel out that bottom tab, that bottom nipple of that carburetor, and it's going to drain into this rubber boot here. And what that's going to do now is run from here down to this cover. If we pull this cover, it's I loosen the screw, but it's a Phillips screw, and we've got a spring on the bottom, or a screen on the bottom here. We want to make sure periodically that gets cleaned, make sure it's allowing fuel to drip out of there, run to the bottom side of the motor, rather than fill up this area full of fuel, which would not be a good thing. So once we get this boot pried off of here, just be careful not to rip that boot, or you'll want to replace it because that seals up that area. We can just kind of walk that carburetor off. Now we've got the carburetor now. Well, also oil pump is over here. This oil pump line that is connected with the throttle cable is going to come out. We've got a groove here for our oil line, and then also this boot here will that kind of seals off this area will come off with it. So now we've got your carburetor out of the crankcase there, and there's that cover, and we'll go ahead and disassemble the carburetor. Now the first thing we're going to do is pull this boot off here, that way we get that out of the way. And I grabbed a pair of pliers and flatten. There's a keeper here that we're just going to straighten out, and it's not a thick keeper. So you can probably do that with your fingers, but once you get it straightened up slightly, you just kind of walk that keeper out, and it popped that cap off there while we were doing it. But that allows us to pull that cap, this rubber boot up even more. We've got your idle screw here, so this is your idle adjust right here on top, and it sits right down on top of this, which also adjusts your idle. So when you're turning this screw here, it's a black screw in this case, it'll turn this tab here. Now what we're going to do is pull this top cap, and we just spin that off. This is an aluminum cap, so just be careful going back together you don't cross thread it. And we've got your slide there with your needle, and then your throttle cable coming down into that needle. Here's your choke assembly here, and that's still obviously in the carburetor, and we'll pull that out and clean it. Now we've got your top slide here. Simple enough to remove it, just I don't know if we've got the time to do it, but this cable just needs to come and slide out this bottom tab here. So undo the bolt. Here. Then you can push down and push that throttle cable into that other little area there. And once you get it, there we go. Once you get it up in there, you'll be able to slide that throttle cable completely out, and it'll just pull up like that. And this assembly, kind of the same thing. We've got a keeper up top here. I'm not going to disassemble this because I like to keep this part together to sell it. But there's a little keeper up top here. Straighten that out. Slide this needle all the way down there, and that is disassembled. So that's the throttle cable and the oil pump cable on a KE100. And there's your slide here, and then we'll go ahead and start disassembling this carburetor. We've got your choke assembly that we're going to pull first, and that's a plunger. A brass fittings there. 12 millimeter wrench will loosen that cap up, and then you can just pull it out. There's your plunger there. You want to make sure that you spray carbon choke cleaner down in there, blow it out, make sure and clean that up, make sure there's no grooves, make sure there's no rocks, make sure all that's in good condition before going back together. I'll keep that here so you're able to see it. Next we're going to go and pull the bottom bowl off here. We've got 4 Phillips screws to this bowl. Your fuel line is going to come in here, and it's going to run down into this bowl area. If you've got a broken needle or seat down in this, I'll get this pulled apart here so you know what I'm talking about. This float on this carburetor is damaged. And it works right now, but will need repaired. Or replace, excuse me. So your fuel, there's your bowl there. Your fuel is going to come down here, go down into here, and then your needle and seat is this area here. Now this can be adjusted slightly depending on how much fuel is needed, where this float is going to sit because when it's filled up with fuel, this float is going to rise, shutting that fuel off. Now if it's not shutting off when it should, you're getting fuel overflowing constantly, you may want to first you want to pull that carburetor and inspect that needle and seat. If that needle and seat look good, you can just slightly bend that tab there to adjust that needle down a little bit more. Next we're going to pull the main jet, which is this one here. We've got main jet here, pilot jet here. Main jet is going to have a bigger orifice size, and remove that with a 7 millimeter wrench. You want to make sure you can, when you hold this up to light, you can see through it. So use compressed air, you can blow through it. You can use carbon choke cleaner. I like the Gum Out brand carbon choke cleaner. It does a really good job. If it's worst case scenario, you need to soak your carburetor or run it through an ultrasonic cleaner. We've got a washer here, so you want to make sure that we don't lose that. So keep that set out there. And then now your pilot jet. Now you want to take a small screwdriver as big as will possibly fit into this hole. That way you're connecting with as much of that pilot jet as possible. You don't want to strip that out. You don't want to round that head off because otherwise you got to drill it out. A lot of times you'll ruin your carburetor doing that. So this is your pilot jet here, and this is going to run suck fuel through there when you're starting your motorcycle. So again, you want to make sure you can hold that up to light, see through it, blow through it with compressed air. Make sure that one's good and clean. If they're too plugged up with debris, you want to get a jet cleaner, and that is simply just a small wires that'll fit through those ports and clean it that way. Now we're going to remove this float off of here, and should be fairly easy sliding in and out of there. If you have to use force, just be very careful not to break these posts off of here. That is a common problem, and then that carburetor is destroyed. There is your float there. Again, you can see that somebody had done a little bit of soldering there to try to keep that working, and it works, but it's not ideal. There is your needle there. A lot of times these will get grooved. Occasionally debris will sit in there holding that open, causing fuel just to dump into that bowl. So that is your carburetor there. You want to blow through all those ports, make sure they're clean, and go back together with it the same way that you took it apart. So put that needle and seat in there, again making sure that that's completely cleaned out. Just slide that through there. Main jet, don't forget your washer going on top of there. And snug these up. You don't have to get them extremely tight because it is a brass fitting going into a aluminum carburetor. So just, but you also don't want those falling out while you're riding them, because this will be upside down. There potentially could work itself out. So just make sure you got it good and snug. Pilot jet there, drop it down in there, take a flat screwdriver, screw it in. Make sure that you do not over tighten these, rounding off that head on there. Got those in. Next we're going to put that bowl back on there. Yeah, and make sure that this gasket is good all the way around. That's a common problem for those sitting in fuel. They wear quickly, they weather, and so you want to make sure that's good. Put the screws back in. There's where your overflow fuel comes out. If your bike's bouncing around, your carburetor, your needle and seat's not set properly, your fuel will come out the bottom of this rubber tab here. So one more thing I want to show you is the air fuel screw, and that is can be adjusted depending on altitude, riding conditions, performance done to the motorcycle. But that's going to be right here, and the way you adjust that, you count how many screws in it is right now. Most of the time you're looking at 1 to 2 screws out, so you want to screw it in. So half a turn, full turn. So this one is just 1 screw out, so do half, full, and that is how you adjust your air fuel screw on this carburetor. If you like this video, please subscribe, please share this video, like this video. Thanks for watching.